Hello, hello, hello! Greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of green across this vast, marvelous multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horse, and welcome back, my dear, marvelous, wonderful scholars, to the study. Hello there, hello there, hello there. Hello there, Firefly. Good evening to you. Hello there, Julian20. Good evening to you as well. Hello, 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 all you marvelous, wonderful scholars, wherever you are, whenever you are across this vast, marvelous omniverse. How are you all doing, my wonderful scholars? I hope you're doing well. I hope everything's going well with all of you. Julian20 Fab. Ooh, good, good. Well, that's a word I haven't heard in a long time. Firefly, well enough. Crafting. Ooh, crafting! What are you making, Firefly? Anything interesting? Well, I mean, everything would be interesting, but you know what I mean. Crafting is such great fun, you know? Uh, as for myself, oh, today was rough. Today was rough, my dear scholars. Oh, Horace and I had to deal with so much. I can't even start with it. Firefly working on the recipe project. My great aunt Claire's lemon cake. Oh, lemon cake is so good. Oh, I could go for some lemon cake now. I could go for any sort of cake right now. I mean, if Julian20 cake, yes, yes, cake apparently. Oh, cake sounds so good, but I'm trying to be good and not eat too many sweets. After a comment that Ovid made, I am currently trying to be careful on how much I eat and what I eat. I mean, Ovid meant it in the best terms, but still, it was somewhat damaging to my ego. Julian20, yeah, me too. You two what? What you two, Julian20? Um, but yeah, I mean, Ovid meant Julian20 dieting. Oh, we don't use that word. We just use it's a project. It's a new project, you know? It's that sort of thing. But yes, I'm doing my best. It's very hard. Firefly, aren't we always watching what we eat? That's true. I mean, technically, Firefly and failing. That's pretty much. Julian20 doing a project. Yes, doing a project. I mean, technically, I don't have to eat. I mean, omniversal beings, we kind of just exist. We don't have to eat. We don't have to sleep, technically. We don't have to do a lot of things, but we still do it. We get used to it, trying to fit in with all you non-omniversal beings. Well, technically, you're omniversal beings. I mean, you live in the omniverse, so you technically are omniversal beings. But I come from beyond the omniverse, so yeah, I try to. I'm trying to be careful. You get used to these things to fit in, because you don't want to be wandering around in like say early Mesopotamia, and everyone starts wondering, well, why isn't this guy sleeping? Why is he always around? And then you have to come up with some awkward excuses, and next thing you know, they think you're a deity of some sort, and they're worshiping you, and it gets really well. Technically, what can I say? It gets really awkward after that. Firefly, yes, but does what you eat affect you? If I let it, if I let it, and most of the time I let it just subconsciously, I guess. I mean, consciously, you could kind of help it, but subconsciously, you can't really fight your subconscious. Even us omniversal beings can't do that. It's, it's the pain we suffer. Come on. Ah. Ow. trying to open a bottle of water and I sprayed myself. But yes, anyway, I digress. Tonight, my dear scholars, we are starting a new novel just in time for Spooky Month. Ooh. We are going to be reading The House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgeson. And I've always wanted to read one of Hodgson's longer writings. I've read one of his short stories. What was it called? The Voice in the Dark, which was it's a very very good. What was the Voice in the Fog? I can't remember what it was called. The Voice in the Fog, I think, or A Voice in the Fog. It was really really good, very spooky, very disturbing. But I wanted to read one of his longer pieces, and Hodgson is fairly well known in terms of weird fiction, as they call it. It was either the house. I was going to either read The House on the Borderland or The Nightlands, which is a very, very disturbing apocalyptic novel that he wrote. Um, so, out of the two, though, I chose The House on the Borderland. And the reason why is this was a book that had been on my list for a while. In fact, I think originally last year I had wanted to read it, but I had some things going on and I couldn't get to it, and so I decided to delay it and I never got to read it. So this year, though, I chose that we should read it. Um, it's not very long, I don't think. Books, at least, is not very long. But yes, this is one that I'm hoping that we can that we'll enjoy together. Uh, what else can I say about it? Not much actually. Except yeah, William Hope, William Hope Hodgson. A lot of weird fiction writers admired his work. The book has been cited as being fairly kind of proto mythos, proto Lovecraftian in its own way. Um, it's very different. Oh, I have read some other things by William Hope Hodgson. I forgot. William Hope Hodgson also created Karnaki, who is the prototypical Ghostbuster, as you were. And I read a stream of some of those stories. I think I read about two of them. Julian 20. Oh, I love that show. There was the show. Well, I would say show, but there was an episode done of about Karnaki in I believe what was the name of it? The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. They adapted the what was it called? Oh my goodness gracious, I'm forgetting. The Horse of the Something. I am forgetting the name of it. Union 20. I've seen. Oh, really? Really interesting. Yeah, it starred Donald Pleasance as Karnaki. But William H. Watson, yes, he did a lot of interesting stories. I can't even call them ghost stories. They were very different. But anyway, so my dear scholars, shall we begin our journey to see what lies at the house on the borderland? What say you? Julian 20 says, yes, please. All right. So then, my dear scholars, sit back, relax, have a hot or cold beverage of your liking, dim the lights if possible, and let us begin our reading of The House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson. Let us begin with this. Author's introduction to the manuscript. Many are the hours in which I have pondered upon the story that is set forth in the following pages. I trust that my instincts are not aware when they prompt me to leave the account in simplicity as it was handed to me. And the MS itself, you must picture me. When first it was given into my care, turning it over curiously and making a swift, jerky examination. A small book it is, but thick, and all save the last few pages filled with a quaint but legible handwriting, and writ very close. I have the queer, faint, pit-water smell of it in my nostrils now as I write, and my fingers have subconscious memories of the soft, cloggy feel of the long, damp pages. I read, and in reading lifted the curtains of the impossible that blind the mind and looked out into the unknown. Amid stiff, abrupt sentences I wandered, and presently I had no fault to charge against their abrupt tellings. For, better far than my own ambitious phrasing, is this mutilated story capable of bringing home all that the old recluse of the vanished house had striven to tell. Of the simple, stiffly given account of weird and extraordinary matters I will say little. It lies before you. The inner story must be uncovered, personally, by each reader, according to ability and desire. And even should any fail to see as now I see the shadowed picture and conception of that, to which one may well give the accepted titles of heaven and hell, yet can I promise certain thrills, merely taking the story as a story. William Hope Hodgeson, December 17th, 1907. Chapter 1. The Finding of the Manuscript. Right away in the west of Ireland lies a tiny hamlet called Craigton. It is situated alone at the base of a low hill. Far around there spreads a waste of bleak and totally inhospitable country, where here and there at great intervals one may come upon the ruins of some desolate cottage, unthatched and stark. The whole land is bare and unpeopled, the very earth scarcely covering the rock that lies beneath it, and with which the country abounds in places rising out of the soil in wave-shaped ridges. Yet, in spite of its desolation, my friend Tonelson and I had elected to spend our vacation there. He had stumbled on the place by mere chance the year previously, during the course of a long walking tour, and discovered the possibilities for the angler in a small and unnamed river that runs past the outskirts of the little village. I have said that the river is without name. I may add that no map that I have hitherto consulted has shown either village or stream. They seem to have entirely escaped observation. Indeed, they might never exist for all that the average guide tells one. Possibly this can be partially accounted for by the fact that the nearest railway station, Ardahan, is some 40 miles distant. Ardahan is apparently a village in County Galway in the west of Ireland. It was early one warm evening when my friend and I arrived in Crichton. We had reached Ardahan the previous night, sleeping there in rooms hired at the village post office, and leaving in good time on the following morning, cleaning in securely to one of the typical jaunting cars, a light two-wheeled horse carriage common in Ireland at this time. It had taken us all day to accomplish our journey over some of the roughest tracks imaginable, with the result that we were thoroughly tired and somewhat bad-tempered. However, the tent had to be erected and our goods stowed away before we could think of food or rest. And so we set to work, with the aid of our driver, and soon had the tent up upon a little patch of ground just outside the little village, and quite near to the river. Then, having stored all our belongings, we dismissed the driver, as he had to make his way back as speedily as possible, and told him to come across to us at the end of a fortnight. We had brought sufficient provisions to last us for that space of time, and water we could get from the stream. Fuel we did not need, as we had included a small oil stove among our outfit, and the weather was fine and warm. It was Tonnyson's idea to camp out instead of getting lodgings in one of the cottages. As he put it, there was no joke in sleeping in a room with a numerous family of healthy Irish in one corner and the pigsty in the other, while overhead a ragged colony of roosting fowls distributed their blessings impartially, and the whole place so full of peat smoke that it made a fellow sneeze his head off just to put it inside the doorway. Tonneson had got the stove lit now, and was busy cutting slices of bacon into the frying pan, so I took the kettle and walked down to the river for water. On the way I had to pass close to a little group of the village people, who eyed me curiously, but not in any unfriendly manner, though none of them ventured a word. As I returned with my kettle filled, I went up to them, and after a friendly nod to which they replied in like manner, I asked them casually about the fishing. But instead of answering, they just shook their heads silently and stared at me. I repeated the question, addressing more particularly a great gaunt fellow at my elbow. Yet again I received no answer. Then the man turned to a comrade and said something rapidly in a language that I did not understand. And at once the whole crowd of them fell into jabbering what, after a few moments, I guessed to be pure Irish. At the same time they cast many glances in my direction. For a minute, perhaps, they spoke among themselves thus. Then the man I had addressed faced round at me and said something. By the expression of his face I guessed that he, in turn, was questioning me, but now I had to shake my head and indicate that I did not comprehend what it was that they wanted to know. And so we stood looking at one another, until I heard Tonneson calling to me to hurry up with the kettle. Then with a smile and a nod I left them, and all in the little crowd smiled and nodded in return, though their faces still betrayed their puzzlement. It was evident, I reflected as I went toward the tent, that the inhabitants of these few huts in the wilderness did not know a word of English. And when I told Tonneson, he remarked that he was aware of the fact, and more that it was not at all uncommon in that part of the country, where the people often lived and died in their isolated hamlets without ever coming in contact with the outside world. I wish we had got the driver to interpret for us before we left, I remarked, as we sat down to our meal. It seems so strange for the people of this place not even to know what we've come for. Tonneson grunted in assent, and thereafter was silent for a while. Later, having satisfied our appetites somewhat, we began to talk, laying our plans for the morrow. Then, after a smoke, we closed the flap of the tent and prepared to turn in. I suppose there's no chance of those fellows outside taking anything? I asked as we rolled ourselves in our blankets. Tonneson said that he did not think so, at least while we were about. And as he went on to explain, we could lock up everything except the tent in the big chest that we had brought to hold our provisions. I agreed to this, and soon we were both asleep. Just checking something. Next morning early we rose and went for a swim in the river, after which we dressed and had breakfast. Then we roused out our fishing tackle and overhauled it, by which time our breakfasts having settled somewhat, we made all secure within the tent and strove off in the direction my friend had explored on his previous visit. During the day we fished happily, working steadily upstream, and by evening we had one of the prettiest creels of fish that I had seen for a long while. Returning to the village, we made a good feed off our day's spoil, after which, having selected a few of the finer fish for our breakfast, we presented the remainder to the group of the villagers who had assembled at a respectful distance to watch our doings. They seemed wonderfully grateful and heaped mountains of what I presumed to be Irish blessings upon our heads. Thus we spent several days, having splendid sport and first-rate appetites to do justice upon our prey. We were pleased to find how friendly the villagers were inclined to be, and that there was no evidence of their having ventured to meddle with our belongings during our absences. It was on a Tuesday that we arrived in Cretan, and it would be on the Sunday following that we made a great discovery. Hitherto, we had always gone upstream. On that day, however, we laid aside our rods, and taking some provisions, set off for a long ramble in the opposite direction. The day was warm, and we trudged along leisurely enough, stopping about midday to eat our lunch upon a great flat rock near the river bank. Afterwards we sat and smoked a while, resuming our walk only when we were tired of inaction. That's quite a novel already, giving us a little fishing trip. Oh, always remember, my dear scholars, don't drink from the river. For perhaps another hour we wandered onwards, chatting quietly and comfortably on this and that matter, and on several occasions stopping while my companion, who is something of an artist, made rough sketches of striking bits of the wild scenery. And then, without any warning whatsoever, the river we had followed so confidently came to an abrupt end, vanishing into the earth. "Good Lord!" I said. "Whoever would have thought of this?" And I stared in amazement. Then I turned to Thomason. He was looking with a blank expression upon his face at the place where the river disappeared. In a moment he spoke. "Let's go on for a bit. May reappear again. Anyhow, it is worth investigating." I agreed, and we went forward once more, though rather aimlessly, for we were not at all certain in which direction to prosecute our search. For perhaps a mile we moved onwards, then Tonneson, who had been gazing about curiously, stopped and shaded his eyes. "See," he said after a moment, "isn't that mist or something? Over there, to the right, away in a line with that great piece of rock." And he indicated with his hand. I stared, and after a minute seemed to see something, but could not be certain, and said so. "Anyway," my friend replied, "we'll just go across and have a glance." And he started off in the direction he had suggested. I followed. Presently we came among bushes, and after a time, out upon the top of a high, boulder-strewn bank, from which we looked down into a wilderness of bushes and trees. "Seems as though we had come across upon an oasis in this desert of stone," muttered Tonneson, as he gazed interestedly. And then he was silent, his eyes fixed. And I looked also, for up from somewhere about the center of the wooded lowland, there rose high into the quiet air a great column of haze-like spray, upon which the sun shone, causing innumerable rainbows. "How beautiful!" I exclaimed. "Yes," answered Tonneson thoughtfully. "There must be a waterfall or something over there. Perhaps it's our river come to light again. Let's go and see." Let me get a drink of water. Ah. Down the sloping bank we made our way, and entered among the trees and shrubberies. The bushes were matted and the trees overhung us, so that the place was disagreeably gloomy, though not dark enough to hide from me the fact that many of the trees were fruit trees, and that here and there one could trace indistinctly signs of a long-departed cultivation. Thus it came to me that we were making our way through the riot of a great and ancient garden. I said as much to Tonneson, and he agreed that there certainly seemed reasonable grounds for my belief. What a wild place it was, so dismal and somber. Somehow, as we went forward, a sense of the silent loneliness and desertion of the old garden grew upon me, and I felt shivering. One could imagine things lurking among the tangled bushes, while in the very air of the place there seemed something uncanny. I think Tonneson was conscious of this also, though he said nothing. Suddenly, we came to a halt. Through the trees there had grown upon our ears a distant sound. Tonneson bent forward, listening. I could hear it more plainly now. It was continuous and harsh, a sort of droning roar, seeming to come from far away. I experienced a queer, indescribable little feeling of nervousness. What sort of place was it into which we had got? I looked at my companion to see what he thought of the matter, and noted that there was only puzzlement in his face. And then as I watched his features, an expression of comprehension crept over them, and he nodded his head. "That's a waterfall," he exclaimed with conviction. "I know the sound now." And he began to push vigorously through the bushes in the direction of the noise. As we went forward, the sound became plainer continually, showing that we were heading straight towards it. Steadily the roaring grew louder and nearer until it appeared, as I remarked to Tonneson, almost to come from under our feet. And still we were surrounded by the trees and shrubs. "Take care!" Tonneson called to me. "Look where you're going!" And then suddenly we came out from among the trees onto a great open space, where not 6 paces in front of us yawned the mouth of a tremendous chasm, from the depths of which the noise appeared to rise, along with the continuous mist-like spray that we had witnessed from the top of the distant bank. For quite a minute we stood in silence, staring in bewilderment at the sight. Then my friend went forward cautiously to the edge of the abyss. I followed, and together we looked down through a boil of spray at a monster cataract of frothing water that burst, spouting from the side of the chasm, nearly 100 feet below. "Good Lord!" said Tonneson. I was silent, and rather awed. The sight was so unexpectedly grand and eerie, though this latter quality came more upon me later. Presently I looked up and across to the further side of the chasm. There I saw something towering up among the spray. It looked like a fragment of a great ruin, and I touched Tonneson on the shoulder. He glanced round with a start, and I pointed towards the thing. His gaze followed my finger, and his eyes lighted up with a sudden flash of excitement as the object came within his field of view. "Come along!" he shouted above the uproar. "We'll have a look at it. There's something queer about this place. I feel it in my bones." And he started off round the edge of the crater-like abyss. As we neared this new thing, I saw that I had not been mistaken in my first impression. It was undoubtedly a portion of some ruined building, yet now I made it out that it was not built upon the edge of the chasm itself, as I had first supposed, but perched almost at the extreme end of a huge spur of rock that jutted out some 50 or 60 feet above over the abyss. In fact, the jagged mass of ruin was literally suspended in midair. Arriving opposite it, we walked out onto the projecting arm of rock, And I must confess to having felt an intolerable sense of terror as I looked down from that dizzy perch into the unknown depths below us, into the deeps from which there rose ever the thunder of the falling water and the shroud of rising spray. Reaching the ruin, we clambered round it cautiously, and on the further side came upon a mass of fallen stone and rubble. The ruin itself seemed to me, as I proceeded now to examine it minutely, to be a portion of the outer wall of some prodigious structure. It was so thick and substantially built. Yet what it was doing in such a position I could by no means conjecture. Where was the rest of the house or castle, or whatever there had been? I went back to the outer side of the wall and thence to the edge of the chasm, leaving Tonneson rooting systematically among the heap of stones and rubbish on the other outer side. And then I commenced to examine the surface of the ground near the edge of the abyss, to see whether there were not left other remnants of the building to which the earth with the greatest care I could yeah, to which a fragment of ruin evidently belonged. But though I scrutinized the earth with the greatest care, I could see no signs of anything to show that there had ever been a building erected on the spot, and I grew more puzzled than ever. Then I heard a cry from Tonneson. He was shouting my name, excitedly, and without delay I hurried along the rocky promontory to the ruin. I wondered whither he had hurled himself, and then the thought came that perhaps he had found something. More water. I reached the crumbled wall and climbed round. There I found Tonneson standing within a small excavation that he had made among the debris. He was brushing the dirt from something that looked like a book, much crumpled and dilapidated, and opening his mouth every second or two to bellow my name. As soon as he saw that I had come, he handed his prize to me, telling me to put it in my satchel so as to protect it from the damp, while he continued his explorations. This I did, first, however, running the pages through my fingers and noting that they were closely filled with neat, old-fashioned writing that was quite legible, save in one portion where many of the pages were almost destroyed, being muddled and crumpled as though the book had been doubled back at that part. This, I found out from Tonneson, was actually as he had discovered it, and the damage was due probably to the fall of masonry upon the open part. Curiously enough, the book was fairly dry, which I attributed to its having been so securely buried among the ruins. Having put the volume away safely, I turned to and gave Tonneson a hand with his self-imposed task of excavating. Yet though we put in over an hour's hard work, turning over the whole of the unheaped stones and rubbish, we came upon nothing more than some fragments of broken wood, which might have been parts of a desk or table, and so we gave up searching, and went back along the rock once more to the safety of the land. The next thing we did was to make a complete tour of the tremendous chasm, which we were able to observe was in the form of an almost perfect circle, save for where the ruin-crowned spur of rock jutted out, spoiling its symmetry. The abyss was, as Tonneson put it, like nothing so much as a gigantic well or pit, going sheer down into the bowels of the earth. For some time longer we continued to stare about us, and then noticing that there was a clear space away to the north of the chasm, we bent our steps in that direction. Here, distant from the mouth of the mighty pit by some hundreds of yards, we came upon a great lake of silent water. Silent, that is, save in one place where there was a continuous bubbling and gurgling. Now, being away from the noise of the spouting cataract, we were able to hear one another speak, without having to shout at the top of our voices, and I asked Tonneson what he thought of the place. I told him that I didn't like it, that the sooner we were out of it, the better I should be pleased. He nodded in reply, and glanced at the woods behind, furtively. I asked him if he had seen or heard anything. He made no answer, but stood silent as though listening, and I kept quiet too. Suddenly, he spoke. "Hark!" he said, sharply. I looked at him, and then away among the trees and bushes, holding my breath involuntarily. A minute came and went in strange silence, yet I could hear nothing, and I turned to Tonneson to say as much, and then even as I opened my lips to speak, there came a strange wailing noise out of the wood on our left. It appeared to float through the trees, and there was a rustle of stirring leaves, and then silence. All at once Tonneson spoke, and put his hand on my shoulder. "Let us get out of here," he said, and began to move slowly towards where the surrounding trees and bushes seemed thinnest. As I followed him, it came to me suddenly that the sun was low, and that there was a raw sense of chillness in the air. Tonneson said nothing further, but kept on steadily. We were among the trees now, and I glanced around nervously, but saw nothing, save the quiet branches and trunks and the tangled bushes. Onwards we went, and no sound broke the silence except the occasional snapping of a twig under our feet as we moved forward. Yet, in spite of the quietness, I had a horrible feeling that we were not alone, and I kept so close to Tonneson that twice I kicked his heels clumsily, though he said nothing. A minute, and then another, and we reached the confines of the wood, coming out at last upon the bare rockiness of the countryside. Only then was I able to shake off the haunting dread that had followed me among the trees. Once, as we moved away, there seemed to come again a distant sound of wailing, and I said to myself that it was the wind. Yet the evening was breathless. Presently Tonneson began to talk. "Look you," he said with decision, "I would not spend the night in that place for all the wealth that the world holds. There is something unholy, diabolical about it. It came to me all in a moment, just after you spoke. It seemed to me that the woods were full of vile things, you know." "Yes," I answered, and looked back towards the place, but was hidden from us by a rise in the ground. "There's the book," I said, and I put my hand into the satchel. "You've got it safely?" he questioned with a sudden access of anxiety. "Yes," I replied. "Perhaps," he continued, "we shall learn something from it when we get back to the tent. We'd better hurry too. We're a long way off still, and I don't fancy now being caught out here in the dark." It was 2 hours later when we reached the tent, and without delay we set to work to prepare a meal, for we had eaten nothing since our lunch at midday. Supper over, we cleared the things out of the way and lit our pipes. Then Tonneson asked me to get the manuscript out of my satchel. This I did, and then, as we could not both read from it at the same time, he suggested that I should read the thing out loud. "And mind," he cautioned, knowing my propensities, "don't go skipping half the book." Yet, had he but known what it contained, he would have realized how needless such advice was, for once at least. And there, seated in the opening of our little tent, I began the strange tale of the house on the borderland. For such was the title of the MS. And this is told in the following. This is told in the following pages. Oh my goodness, why did my head go like that? Oh my goodness gracious. I'm sorry about that, dear scholars. Give me a second. Ooh. That was very odd. But then again, this is an odd book, isn't it? Because we haven't even gotten to the story. Julian 20, what an introduction. Yes. Yes, it is quite an introduction, isn't it? And this is just the introduction of the story. I'm sorry about my head going like this. I have no idea why it did that. Oh. Must have bent it. Weird. We'll blame it on dimensional, what should we blame it on, Horace? Dimensional waves? Dimensional ripples? Dimensional ripples. That's what it is. Excuse me. So, this next Julian 20, dimensional flux. Yes, yes. So, these next pages, all of them are in character in the manuscript. So, it's another character reading it. Another character saying these words other than the character who's reading it. But I'm going to keep the same voice because it is much easier than creating a new voice. I will do voices for the other characters, but not for the narrators. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay. Chapter 2. Let me move over here. The Plane of Silence. I am an old man. I live here in this ancient house, surrounded by huge unkept gardens. The peasantry who inhabit the wilderness beyond say that I am mad. That is because I will have nothing to do with them. I live here alone with my old sister, who is also my housekeeper. We keep no servants. I hate them. I have one friend, a dog. Yes, I would sooner have old Pepper than the rest of creation together. Well, pets, pets are important. He at least understands me, and has sense enough to leave me alone when I am in my dark moods. I have decided to start a kind of diary. It may enable me to record some of the thoughts and feelings that I cannot express to anyone. But beyond this, I am anxious to make some record of the strange things that I have heard and seen during many years of loneliness in this weird old building. For a couple of centuries, this house has had a reputation. A bad one. And until I bought it, for more than 80 years, no one had lived here. Consequently, I got the old place at a ridiculously low figure. I am not superstitious, but I have ceased to deny that things happen in this old house, things that I cannot explain, and therefore I must needs ease my mind by writing down an account. Firefly. Oh, Julian 20, time to leave for ballet class. Read well. Ah, thank you, Julian 20. You enjoy your class. Firefly, see you enjoy class. Yes, you enjoy your class, Julian 20. I am not superstitious, but I have ceased to deny that things happen in this old house, things that I cannot explain, and therefore I must needs ease my mind by writing down an account of them to the best of my ability. Though, should this, my diary, ever be read when I am gone, the readers will but shake their heads and be the more convinced that I was mad. This house, how ancient it is, though its age strikes one less, perhaps, than the quaintness of its structure, which is curious and fantastic to the last degree. Little curved towers and pinnacles, with outlines suggestive of leaping flames, predominant, while the body of the building is in the form of a circle. I have heard that there is an old story told among the country people to the effect that the devil built the place. However, that is as may be. True or not, I neither know nor care, save as it may have helped to cheapen it ere I came. I must have been here some 10 years before I saw sufficient to warrant any belief in the stories current in the neighborhood about this house. It is true that I had, on at least a dozen occasions, seen, vaguely, things that puzzled me, and perhaps had felt more than I had seen, and perhaps had felt more than I had seen. Then, as the years passed, bringing age upon me, I became often aware of something unseen, yet unmistakably present in the empty rooms and corridors. Still, it was, as I have said, many years before I saw any real manifestations of the so-called supernatural. It was not Halloween. Oh, they even mention Halloween in this story. Interesting. If I were telling a story for amusement's sakes, I should probably place it on that night of nights. But this is a true record of my own experiences, and I would not put pen to paper to amuse anyone. No. It was after midnight on the morning of the 21st day of January. I was sitting reading, as is often my custom, in my study. Pepper lay sleeping near my chair. Without warning, the flames of the two candles went low, and then shone with a ghastly green effluence. I looked up quickly, and as I did so, I saw the light sink into a dull, ruddy tint, so that the room glowed with a strange, heavy, crimson twilight that gave the shadows behind the chairs and tables a double depth of blackness. And wherever the light struck, it was as though luminous blood had been splashed over the room. Down on the floor, I heard a faint, frightened whimper, and something pressed itself in between my 2 feet. It was Pepper, cowering under my dressing gown. Pepper, usually as brave as a lion. It was this movement of the dog's, I think, that gave me the first twinge of real fear. I had been considerably startled when the lights burned at first green and then red, but had been momentarily under the impression that the change was due to some influx of noxious gas into the room. Where would noxious gas come from? Must have been an interesting dinner. Now, however, I saw that it was not so, for the candles burned with a steady flame and showed no signs of going out, as would have been the case had the change been due to fumes in the atmosphere. I did not move. I felt distinctly frightened, but could think of nothing better to do than wait. For perhaps a minute, I kept my glance about the room nervously. Then I noticed that the lights had commenced to sink, very slowly, until presently they showed minute specks of red fire, like the gleamings of rubies in the darkness. Still I sat watching, while a sort of dreamy indifference seemed to steal over me, banishing altogether the fear that had begun to grip me. Away in the far end of the huge old-fashioned room, I became conscious of a faint glow. Steadily it grew, filling the room with gleams of quivering green light. Then they sank quickly and changed, even as the candle flames had done, into a deep, somber crimson that strengthened and lit up the room with a flood of awful glory. The light came from the end wall and grew ever brighter until its intolerable glare caused my eyes acute pain, and involuntarily I closed them. It may have been a few seconds before I was able to open them, The first thing I noticed was that the light had decreased greatly, so that it no longer tried my eyes. Then, as it grew still duller, I was aware all at once that instead of looking at the redness, I was staring through it and through the wall beyond. Gradually, as I became more accustomed to the idea, I realized that I was looking out onto a vast plain, lit with the same gloomy twilight that pervaded the room. The immensity of this plain scarcely can be conceived. In no part could I perceive its confines. It seemed to broaden and spread out so that the eye failed to perceive any limitations. Slowly the details of the nearer portions began to grow clear. Then in a moment almost, the light died away, and the vision, if vision it were, faded and was gone. Suddenly, I became conscious that I was no longer in the chair. Instead, I seemed to be hovering above it and looking down at a dim something, huddled and silent. In a little while, a cold blast struck me, and I was outside in the night, floating like a bubble up through the darkness. As I moved, an icy coldness seemed to enfold me so that I shivered. After a time, I looked to right and left and saw the intolerable blackness of the night, pierced by remote gleams of fire. Onwards, outwards I drove. Once I glanced behind and saw the earth, a small crescent of blue light, receding away to my left. Further off, the sun, a splash of white flame, burned vividly against the dark. An indefinite period passed. Then, for the last time, I saw the earth, an enduring globule of radiant blue swimming in an eternity of ether. And there I, a fragile flake of soul dust, flickered silently across the void, from the distant blue into the expanse of the unknown. Oh, excuse me. A great while seemed to pass over me, and now I could nowhere see anything. And now I could nowhere, and now I could nowhere see anything. I had passed beyond the fixed stars and plunged into the huge blackness that waits beyond. All this time I had experienced little save a sense of lightness and cold discomfort. Now, however, the atrocious darkness seemed to creep into my soul, and I became filled with fear and despair. What was going to become of me? Where was I going? Even as the thoughts were formed, there grew against the impalpable blackness that wrapped me a faint tinge of blood. It seemed extraordinary, remote, and mist-like, yet at once the feeling of oppression was lightened, and I no longer despaired. Slowly the distant redness became plainer and larger, until as I drew nearer it spread out into a great somber glare, dull and tremendous. Still I fled onward, and presently I had come so close that it seemed to stretch beneath me like a great ocean of somber red. I could see little save that it appeared to spread out interminably in all directions. In a further space I found that I was descending upon it, and soon I sank into a great sea of sullen, red-hewn clouds. Slowly I emerged from these, and there below me I saw the stupendous plain that I had seen from my room in this house that stands upon the borders of the silences. Presently I landed, and stood surrounded by a great waste of loneliness. The place was lit with a gloomy twilight that gave an impression of indescribable desolation. Afar to my right, within the sky, there burnt a gigantic ring of dull red fire, from the outer edge of which was projected huge writhing flames, darted and jagged. The interior of this ring was black, black as the gloom of the outer night. I comprehended at once that it was from this extraordinary sun that the place derived its doleful light. From that strange source of light, I glanced down again to my surroundings. Everywhere I looked, I saw nothing but the same flat weariness of interminable plain. Nowhere could I descry any signs of life, not even the ruins of some ancient habitation. Gradually, I found that I was being borne forward, flowing across the flat waste. For what seemed an eternity, I moved onwards. I was unaware of any great sense of impatience, though some curiosity and a vast wonder were with me continually. Always I saw around me the breadth of that enormous plain, and always I searched for some new thing to break its monotony, but there was no change. Only loneliness, silence, and desert. Presently, in a half-conscious manner, I noticed that there was a faint mistiness, ruddy in hue, lying over its surface. Still, when I looked more intently, I was unable to say that it was really mist, for it appeared to blend with the plain, giving it a peculiar unrealness, and conveying to the senses the idea of unsubstantiality. Gradually, I began to weary with the sameness of the thing. Yet it was a great time before I perceived any sign of the place towards which I was being conveyed. At first I saw it far ahead, like a long hillock on the surface of the plain. Then as I drew near I perceived that I had been mistaken, for instead of a low hill, I made out now a chain of great mountains, whose distant peaks towered up into the red gloom, until they were almost lost to sight. Well, this isn't the usual sort of haunting you'd expect in a haunted house, is it? Seems more like a travel into a part of the study, honestly. Reminds me of a couple of rooms of the study. But it's very odd, isn't it? He doesn't go for the usual haunting, only something, some kind of journey. It's almost science fiction in a way, in an odd way. Hodgson, as I said, very unusual with the way he writes his horror and his I don't even know how to describe it. His fictions. He's got a very creative dark bent to it. But let's continue. Chapter 3. The House in the Arena. Excuse me. And so, after a time, I came to the mountains. There, of course, my journey was altered, and I began to move along their bases until all at once I saw that I had come opposite to a vast rift opening into the mountains. Through this I was borne, moving at no great speed. On either side of me, huge scraped walls of rock-like substance rose sheer. Far overhead I discerned a thin ribbon of red where the mouth of the chasm opened, among inaccessible peaks. Within was gloom, deep and somber, and chilly silence. For a while I went onward steadily, and then at last I saw ahead a deep red glow that told me I was near upon the further opening of the gorge. A minute came and went, and I was at the exit of the chasm, staring out upon an enormous amphitheater of mountains. Yet of the mountains and the terrible grandeur of the place I recked nothing, for I was confounded with amazement to behold at a distance of several miles, and occupying the center of the arena, a stupendous structure, built apparently of green jade. Yet in itself it was not the discovery of the building that had so astonished me, but the fact, which became every moment more apparent, that in no particular save in color and its enormous size did this lonely structure vary from this house in which I live. Oh, that's interesting. A doppelganger. Doppelganger house. For a while, I continued to stare fixedly. Even then, I could scarcely believe that I saw aright. In my mind, a question formed, reiterating incessantly. What does it mean? What does it mean? And I was unable to make answer, even out of the depths of my imagination. I seemed capable only of wonder and fear. For a time longer I gazed, noting continually some fresh point of resemblance that attracted me. At last, wearied and sorely puzzled, I turned from it, to view the rest of the strange place onto which I had intruded. Hitherto I had been so engrossed in my scrutiny of the house that I had given only a courtesy glance round. Now that I looked, I began to realize upon what sort of place I had come. The arena, for so I have termed it, appeared a perfect circle of about 10 to 12 miles in diameter, the house, as I have mentioned before, standing in the center. The surface of the place, like to that of the plain, had a peculiar misty appearance that was yet not mist. From a rapid survey, my glance passed quickly upwards, along the slopes of the circling mountains. How silent they were! I think that this is the same abominable stillness. I think that excuse me. I think that this same abominable stillness was more trying to me than anything that I had so far seen or imagined. I was looking up now at the great crags towering so lofty. Up there, the impalpable redness gave a blurred appearance to everything. And then, as I peered curiously, a new terror came to me, for away up among the dim peaks to my right, I descried a vast shape of blackness, giant-like. It grew upon my sight. It had an enormous equine head with gigantic ears and seemed to peer steadfastly down into the arena. What? There was that about the pose that gave me the impression of eternal watchfulness, of having warded that dismal place through unknown eternities. Slowly the monster became plainer to me, and then suddenly my gaze sprang from it to something far further off and higher among the crags. For a long minute I gazed fearfully. I was strangely conscious of something not altogether unfamiliar, as though something stirred in the back of my mind. The thing was black, and had 4 grotesque arms. The features showed indistinctly. Round the neck I made out several light-colored objects. Slowly the details came to me, and I realized coldly that they were skulls. Further down the body was another circling belt showing less dark against the black trunk. Then, even as I puzzled to know what the thing was, a memory slid into my mind, and straightway. Okay, so this is just written in the book. I'm quoting from it. Doesn't follow my views. It is of the times. What can I say? Unfortunately. And straightway I knew that I was looking at a monstrous representation of Kali, the Hindu goddess of death. Oh, that's interesting to find in wherever he is. Other resemblances of my old student days drifted into my thoughts, remembrances. My glance fell back upon the huge beast-headed thing. Simultaneously, I recognized it for the ancient Egyptian god Set, or Seth, the destroyer of souls. With the knowledge there came a great sweep of questioning. Two of the... I stopped and endeavored to think. Things beyond my imagination peered in my frightened mind. I saw obscurely. The old gods of mythology. I tried to comprehend to what it was all pointing. My gaze dwelt flickeringly between the two. If... An idea came swiftly, and I turned and glanced rapidly upwards, searching the gloomy crags away to my left. Something loomed out under a great peak, a shape of grayness. I wonder I had not seen it earlier, and then remembered I had not yet viewed that portion. I saw it more plainly now. It was, as I have said, gray. It had a tremendous head, but no eyes. That part of its face was blank. Now I saw that there were other things up among the mountains. Further off, reclining on a lofty ledge, I made out a livid mass, irregular and ghoulish. It seemed without form save for an unclean half-animal face that looked out vilely from somewhere about its middle. And then I saw others. There were hundreds of them. They seemed to grow out of the shadows. Several I recognized almost immediately as mythological deities. Others were strange to me, utterly strange, beyond the power of a human mind to conceive. On each side I looked and saw more continually. The mountains were full of strange things, beast gods and horrors, so atrocious and bestial that possibility and decency deny any further attempt to describe them. And I was filled with a terrible sense of overwhelming horror and fear and repugnance. Yet, spite of these, I wondered exceedingly. Was there then, after all, something in the old heathen worship, something more than the mere deifying of men, animals, and elements? The thought gripped me. Was there? Need more water? Later, a question repeated itself. What were they, those beast gods and the others? At first they had appeared to me just sculpted monsters placed indiscriminately among the inaccessible peaks and precipices of the surrounding mountains. Now, as I scrutinized them with greater intentness, my mind began to reach out to fresh conclusions. There was something about them, an indescribable sort of silent vitality, that suggested to my broadening consciousness a state of life in death, a something that was by no means life as we understand it, but rather an inhuman form of existence that well might be likened to a deathless trance, a condition in which it was possible to imagine their continuing eternity, their continuing eternally. Immortal! The word rose in my thoughts unbidden, and straightway I grew to wondering whether this might be the immortality of the gods. And then in the midst of my wondering and musing, something happened. Until then I had been staying just within the shadow of the exit of the great rift. Now without volition on my part, I drifted out of the semi-darkness and began to move slowly across the arena towards the house. At this I gave up all thoughts of those prodigious shapes above me, and could only stare frightenedly at the tremendous structure towards which I was being conveyed so remorselessly. Yet though I searched earnestly, I could discover nothing that I had not already seen, and so became gradually calmer. Presently I had reached a point more than halfway between the house and the gorge. All around was spread the stark loneliness of the place and the unbroken silence. Steadily I neared the great building. Then all at once something caught my vision. Something that came round one of the huge buttresses of the house, and so into full view. It was a gigantic thing, and moved with a curious lope, going almost upright, after the manner of a man. It was quite unclothed, and had a remarkable luminous appearance. Yet it was the face that attracted and frightened me the most. It was the face of a swine. Drink of water. Silently, intently, I watched this horrible creature, and forgot my fear momentarily in my interest in its movements. It was making its way cumbrously round the building, stopping as it came to each window to peer in and shake at the bars with which, as in this house, they were protected. and whenever it came to a door, it would push at it, fingering the fastening stealthily. Evidently was searching for an ingress into the house. I had come now to within less than a quarter of a mile of the great structure, and still I was compelled forward. Abruptly the thing turned and gazed hideously in my direction. It opened its mouth, and for the first time the stillness of that abominable place was broken by a deep, booming note that sent an addled thrill of apprehension through me. Then immediately I became aware that it was coming towards me swiftly and silently. In an instant it had covered half the distance that lay between, and still I was borne helplessly to meet it. Only 100 yards, and the brutish ferocity of the giant face numbed me with a feeling of unmitigated horror. I could have screamed in the supremeness of my fear, and then in the very moment of my extremity and despair, I became conscious that I was looking down upon the arena from a rapidly increasing height. I was rising, rising. In an inconceivably short while I had reached an altitude of many 100 feet. Beneath me, the spot that I had just left was occupied by the foul swine creature. It had gone down on all fours and was snuffing and rooting like a veritable hog at the surface of the arena. A moment and it rose to its feet, clutching upwards, with an expression of desire upon its face, such as I have never seen in this world. Continually I mounted higher. A few minutes it seemed, and I had risen above the great mountains, floating alone afar in the redness. At a tremendous distance below, the arena showed dimly, and the mighty house looked no larger than a tiny spot of green. The swine thing was no longer visible. Presently I passed over the mountains out above the huge breadth of the plain. Far away on its surface in the direction of the ring-shaped sun there showed a confused blur. I looked towards it indifferently. It reminded me somewhat of the first glimpse I had caught of the mountain amphitheater. With a sense of weariness I glanced upward at the immense ring of fire. What a strange thing it was. Then as I stared out from the dark center there spurted a sudden flare of extraordinarily vivid fire. Compared with the size of the black center, it was as naught, yet in itself stupendous. With awakened interest I watched it carefully, noting its strange boiling and glowing. Then in a moment the whole thing grew dim and unreal, and so passed out of sight. Much amazed, I glanced down to the plain from which I was still rising. Thus I received a fresh surprise. The plain, everything, had vanished, and only a sea of red mist was spread far below me. Gradually as I stared, this grew remote, and died away into a dim, far mystery of red against an unfathomable night. A while, and even this had gone, and I was wrapped in an impalpable, lightless gloom. So, my dear scholars, should we read one more chapter for the night, or should we stop here, do you think? What do you think, my dear scholars? Excuse me. I will leave it up to you. What shall I do? Shall I read another chapter, one more, or should I stop here? They're not very long chapters by any means. Actually, the next chapter is very short. I'll read one more, because it seems like the next chapter is a very short one. Chapter 4. The Earth. Thus I was, and only the memory that I had lived through the dark once before served to sustain my thoughts. A great time passed, ages, and then a single star broke its way through the darkness. It was the first of one of the outlying clusters of this universe. Presently it was far behind, and all about me shone the splendor of the countless stars. Later years it seemed I saw the sun, a cloud of flame. Around it I made out presently several remote specks of light, the planets of the solar system. And so I saw the earth again, blue and unbelievably minute. It grew larger and became defined. A long space of time came and went, and then at last I entered in the shadow of the world, plunging headlong into the dim and holy earth night. Overhead were the old constellations, and there was a crescent moon. Then as I neared the earth's surface, a dimness swept over me, and I appeared to sink into a black mist. For a while I knew nothing. I was unconscious. Gradually I became aware of a faint, distant whining. It became plainer. A desperate feeling of agony possessed me. I struggled madly for breath and tried to shout. A moment and I got my breath more easily. I was conscious that something was licking my hand. Something damp swept across my face. I heard a panting, and then again the whining. It seemed to come to my ears now, with a sense of familiarity, and I opened my eyes. All was dark, but the feeling of oppression had left me. I was seated, and something was whining piteously and licking me. I felt strangely confused and instinctively tried to ward off the thing that licked. My head was curiously vacant, and for the moment I seemed incapable of action or thought. Then things came back to me, and I called Pepper faintly. I was answered by a joyful bark and renewed and frantic caresses. In a little while I felt stronger and put out my hand for the matches. I groped about for a few moments blindly, then my hands lit upon them, and I struck a light and looked confusedly around. All about me I saw the old familiar things, and there I sat full of dazed wonders, until the flame of the match burnt my finger and I dropped it, while a hasty expression of pain and anger escaped my lips, surprising me with the sound of my own voice. After a moment I struck another match, and stumbling across the room lit the candles. As I did so, I observed that they had not burned away, but had been put out. As the flames shot up, I turned and stared about the study. Yet there was nothing unusual to see, and suddenly a gust of irritation took me. What had happened? I held my head with both hands and tried to remember. Ah! The great silent plain and the ring-shaped sun of red fire. Where were they? Where had I seen them? How long ago? I felt dazed and muddled. Once or twice I walked up and down the room unsteadily. My memory seemed dull, and already the thing I had witnessed came back to me with an effort. I had a remembrance of cursing peevishly in my bewilderment. Suddenly I turned faint and giddy and had to grasp at the table for support. During a few moments I held on weakly, and then managed to totter sideways into a chair. After a little time, I felt somewhat better, and succeeded in reaching the cupboard where usually I keep brandy and biscuits. I poured myself out a little of the stimulant, and drank it off. Then taking a handful of biscuits, I returned to my chair and began to devour them ravishly. I was vaguely surprised at my hunger. I felt as though I had eaten nothing for an uncountably long while. Cookies do sound really good right now, honestly. As I ate, my glance roved about the room, taking in its various details and still searching, though almost unconsciously for something tangible upon which to take hold among the invisible mysteries that encompass me. Surely, I thought, there must be something. And in the same instant my gaze dwelt upon the face of the clock in the opposite corner. Therewith I stopped eating and just stared. For though its ticking indicated most certainly that it was still going, the hands were pointing to a little before the hour of midnight, whereas it was, as well I knew, considerably after that time when I had witnessed the first of the strange happenings I had just described. Ooh, that's creepy. Firefly having a molasses cookie to try in the next few weeks. Oh, sounds wonderful! I've never actually had molasses cookies, but I've heard they're pretty good. For perhaps a moment I was astounded and puzzled. Had the hour been the same as when I had last seen the clock? Had the hour been the same as when I had last seen the clock, I should have concluded that the hands had stuck in one place, while the internal mechanism went on as usual. But that would in no way account for the hands having traveled backwards. Then, even as I turned the matter over in my wearied brain, the thought flashed upon me that it was now close upon the morning of the 22nd, and that I had been unconscious to the visible world through the greater portion of the last 24 hours. The thought occupied my attention for a full minute, and then I commenced to eat again. I was still very hungry. During breakfast next morning, I inquired casually of my sister regarding the date, and found my surmise correct. I had indeed been absent, at least in spirit, for nearly a day and a night. My sister asked me no questions, for it is not by any means the first time that I have been kept to my study for a whole day, and sometimes a couple of days at a time, when I have been particularly engrossed in my books and work. And so the days pass on, and I am still filled with a wonder to know the meaning of all that I saw on that memorable night. Yet, well I know that my curiosity is little likely to be satisfied. And we will stop here, my dear scholars. I can feel my energy really kind of waning. It's very different, isn't it? A very different kind of haunting. Rather than ghosts or spirits, we have what seems to be an astral projection into a parallel dimension. Or at least, I'm not sure, because it feels like he experienced seeing the universe created, or at least the solar system created, or something. Because the way they describe it, it's almost like he went into another realm astrally and then projected backwards through time, maybe projected backwards through time, and then went back forwards, which meant he was gone for an entire day. That is, the experience has to be absolute terrifying. I mean, I'm used to that sort of thing, but to someone like that, oh my goodness gracious, it has to be really scary. Um, all right. So, next week. Next week, my dear scholars, I will actually not be available. I am going on a little journey. Um, but I have pre-recorded some stories on my YouTube channel, which you can find under Matsu Quinox, on both that Monday and that Thursday. So keep an eye out for it. If you aren't subscribed to me on YouTube, you can give me a follow. It is again under the name Matsu Quinox, where I actually sometimes post pre-recorded streams that you can only find there, as well as short stories and poems that I'll write, that I'll not write, that I'll read on there. So yeah. So next week, do look forward to a couple of spooky stories that Monday and Thursday. All right, let's see who we can raid for tonight before we go. Who is available? Um, let's let's rate Jewelry Jelly. She has not been online for a while. She is playing Death Road to Canada, it looks like. Which I've heard of, never seen it. She's playing a game. We'll rate her. So then, my dear scholars, I say unto you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Till we meet each other again at the study. Take care, and I shall see you next time. Till then, farewell and bye bye.